سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Alhamdulillah, in our lessons on the Tariqa al-Muhammadiyya, in which we're looking at Imam Birgivi's manual on taqwa, and particularly on the section on acquiring taqwa. And in this, we are looking at the 8 pathways through which taqwa is upheld, beginning with the heart. And we looked at the heart being the seat of character. The actions of the heart are characters, right? They're traits that become ingrained. And we looked at how one rids oneself of bad character. But today we're going to be looking at what are the 60 blameworthy traits of character. But we're going to begin firstly with a summary of what is good character, right? With a summary of what is good character, because one appreciates things by their opposites, right? One appreciates things by their opposites, right? And also because the section coming up is heavy. It is heavy. That what is a summary of good character? And there's many summaries of good character, because this summarizes deen. What is religion? Right? إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ صَالِحَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was only sent to perfect noble character. So, one of the beautiful presentations of what is good character was given by Imam al-Qazwini. Imam al-Qazwini took a work by al-Bayhaqi on Shu'abul Iman, on the branches of faith. And he summarized it. And Imam al-Bayhaqi and many other scholars before him, like al-Halimi and many other scholars after him, wrote about this topic of Shu'abul Iman, the branches of faith. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, faith, al-Iman bid'un wa sab'una shu'ba. Faith has 70 odd branches. Right? The highest of it is belief in Allah. Right? وَأَدْنَاهَا إِمَاتَةُ الْأَذَى عَنِ الطَّرِيقِ. And the least of it is removing harm from people's path. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us, وَالْحَيَاءُ شُعْبَةٌ مِّنَ الْإِيمَانِ. And modesty is a branch of faith, meaning it's a great branch of faith. So, many a scholar wrote on this topic, on the branches of faith. Imam Bayhaqi's work is in multiple volumes explaining these 77 branches of faith. So he lists the branches and the hadiths and what the early Muslims said and the scholarly understanding of these key branches of faith. It's one of the great encyclopedias of Islam. And Al-Qazwini abridged it, and the abridgment is translated into English. So Al-Qazwini asks the question, what is good character? What is good character? And he mentions a very nice definition of good character, right? A very nice definition, which is the following, right? That what is good character? He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, that وَمَعْنَى حُسْنِ الْخُلُقِ سَلَامَةُ النَّفْسِ نَحْوَ الْأَرْفَقِ مِنَ الْأَفْعَالِ. Right? That the سلامة النفس نحو الأرفق الأحمد من الأفعال. That good character is for the self to be in a state of wellness, such that it inclines towards the easiest and most praiseworthy of actions. That's a sign of good character, right? And then he makes this important point that khuluq has 2 components, and others before and after, of course, have said the same thing. وَقَدْ يَكُونُ ذَلِكَ في ذات الله تعالى, that may relate to how you are with Allah, that you incline, yourself is in a state of wellness such that you incline towards the most appropriate, the most suitable and most praiseworthy of conduct with Allah and also with people, right? Also with respect to people, right? So there's good character with Allah, right? There's good character with Allah. And he says, and that's for the servant. وهو أن يكون العبد منشرح الصدر بأوامر الله. It is for the servant to have an expansive chest with respect to the commands of Allah. And likewise with respect to Allah's prohibitions. So that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands something, what is the attitude of the servant? They feel positive about it, right? They feel positive about it. They have a positive attitude towards it. And they don't find the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heavy. They don't find the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heavy. So that's one sign of the... Did you just accept? Sorry, I sent it to the wrong place. Okay, so the first sign of good character with Allah is to have an expansive heart with respect to the commands of Allah and His provisions, such that one does what Allah has commanded, but with a positive spirit, right? One finds it easy to pursue what Allah has commanded. Content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with respect to His commands, likewise His prohibitions. Right? Not finding the commands of Allah heavy. Right? So, good character with Allah relates to the commands of Allah. The commands of Allah are of two types. The commands of moral responsibility, when we know that Allah has commanded us to do something or prohibited us to do something, or from doing something. So one feels an acceptingness towards it, right? Inshirah al-sadr. You are open to it. You feel good about it. You are content with it. You don't feel it a burden. So these are 4 ways you respond to it, right? You have inshirah al-sadr. You feel you're accepting of it and you invite it into your life. You have tib al-nafs. You're positive about it. You are content with it and you do not find it a burden. This has to do with the command of moral responsibility, what Allah has made obligatory or prohibited, but likewise with the existential commands of Allah, which is destiny as it unfolds, the pleasing of it and the heavy. Another sign of a good heart is, right? So one is this, one feels good. We can summarize it, one feels good towards the command of Allah, both the command of responsibility and the existential commands of Allah, of what happens. Number 2, one is avid to do extra good. Nawafil al-khair. Number 3, sign of a good heart, one leaves many of the prohibited things, or many of the permitted things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If one finds leaving them to be closer to slavehood, one finds leaving them to be closer to slavehood. How? If doing this would busy you from something better. Something's allowed, but if you did it, you'll miss out on something that is better, more pleasing to Allah. Or if by doing this permissible thing, you will not fulfill certain duties that are expected of you. It's a sign of good character with Allah. It's often called a good state with Allah. Right? Right? But they're from character. The ulama sometimes distinguish. They use the term khuluq to refer to how you are with people, and they refer to ahwal and maqamat, right? States and stations of how the heart is in its relationship with Allah. But both of it return to the same reality. Both good character with people and good states with Allah return to how you are. How you are with creation and how you are with the Creator. But this caught an important point, so that's why I wanted to share it. Right? And sign of good character with people are many, because people are more difficult to deal with than Allah. Right? He said, from that is that one be easygoing with respect to one's rights. Right? One is not over demanding of one's rights. One fulfills the rights of others fully. Right? But one is not over demanding of the rights of others. So for example, if you are sick and people don't visit you, or if you give salam and someone doesn't respond, then, or if you were invited to someone's house but you weren't honored by them or treated well, or if you ask for someone's help and they don't help, or you do good to someone and they're not grateful, right? Or you spoke and people weren't silent, or you sought permission from a friend and they didn't give you permission, or if you proposed to marry someone from someone's family and they said no, right? Or one asked for more time for one's debt and they said no. And in all these kinds of situations where someone didn't do good to you, then one should not get angry and one should not punish. And one should not change one's opinion of the other party. Why? Because they didn't have to do any of that for you. None of the things that we mentioned. You owe a debt, you ask for more time, they said no, please pay on time. They don't have to give you more time. So you shouldn't, and likewise these other things, you didn't feel respected, etc. Good character is to overlook. Right? And one doesn't respond to hurt with hurt. Right? Rather, one should face what others do with what is better and more virtuous and closer to righteousness, birr, and mindfulness of Allah, taqwa. Right? And of what is praiseworthy and pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So, this good character with people has many, many expressions, right? That one fulfills the rights of others, the basic rights of others, and strives to have excellence in the fulfillment of the rights of others. And one is willing to overlook one's rights, particularly when it's not harmful or deliberate, and one keeps a clear chest with respect to people. And then Imam al-Qazwini summarizes this by saying, وكيف يعامل الناس إنما يأخذ بالأحسن يأخذ الأحسن إماما لنفسه. And then in all dealings with people, one should take only the best of ways as one's imam. فينحو نحوه. And one pursues that way. Then whatever one does, take what is best as one's imam. And follow what it entails. And not contravene it. That is good character. And of course, what is the best of ways in character? It's the character of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? And anyone who looks at the character of the Prophet ﷺ would recognize how far they fall short of it. But one aspires. Right? One aspires. Right? So this is, we wanted to touch upon this because it is so central, right? This is what we're talking about with respect to good character. And we also appreciate from this why, when we look at the blameworthy traits, what is the worst of blameworthy traits? Because some people get confused, right? What are the worst of blameworthy traits? Al-Kufru billah, disbelief in Allah. Right? Because that's how your heart is. And this is, so there's 60 blameworthy traits. The first of them is disbelief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this trait, right, is in need of consideration and appreciation, because it is, everything else shields us from disbelief in Allah, and all good qualities of character cultivate our faith and arise from faith, right? Of active faith or active belief or active disbelief. So he tells us, القسم الثاني في الأخلاق الذميمة. The second part of the section on acquiring taqwa and of the qualities of the heart has to do with the blameworthy traits and what they are. وتفسيرها وعلاجها تفصيلا, and how one treats each of the blameworthy traits of the heart. So he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, اعلم, Imam al-Birgivi says, اعلم أني تتبعتها فوجدتها 60. I have carefully followed up on what are the blameworthy traits of character and have found them to be 60. Right? And it depends, counting, there are 60 fundamental bad traits of the heart, and many of them are interconnected. And we will share, inshallah ta'ala, a diagramming of the traits, right? Because they're somewhat interconnected. And since we're not reading a thriller or a murder mystery, that we'll only disclose the identity of the next blameworthy trait when we get to this one. These traits are interrelated and interpenetrative. So today, for example, we're going to see the first blameworthy trait is disbelief. But one of the causes of disbelief is ignorance. And ignorance itself is the second blameworthy trait of the heart. So disbelief in Allah has 3 reasons, has 3 causes. So disbelief is the first blameworthy trait, but one of the causes of disbelief is the second blameworthy trait of the heart, which is ignorance. One of the other causes of disbelief is refusal. And refusal sometimes arises from حب الرياسة الدنيوية, love of worldly leadership. So you know something is true, but because you want to hold on to or acquire worldly leadership, you would reject the truth, which is disbelief. So love of worldly leadership is both one of the causes of disbelief, and it is the third blameworthy trait of the heart, right? Is it the third blameworthy trait? حب الرياسة الدنيوية? Yes. And so on. So it gets complex, but but you can follow along, and we'll inshallah share the diagramming of this, at least for the initial one, just to diagram it nicely for you to be able to follow. بإذن الله. الأول الكفر بالله تعالى العياذ بالله تعالى منه. The first of the blameworthy traits is disbelief in Allah Most High, right? And this is when we seek Allah's refuge from this. We seek Allah's refuge from this. وَهُوَ أَعْظَمُ الْمُهْلِكَاتِ. And this is the most ruinous of the destructive vices. على الإطلاق, absolutely. So we seek Allah's refuge from it, right? And it's one of the important things that one should be grateful for, the gift of Iman, and one should seek refuge in Allah from disbelief. Right? So many of the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ, right? When we wake and we go to sleep, focus around the meaning of protection and preservation of faith. Allahumma bismika amutu ahya. Allah, it is in your name that I die and I come to life. Right? All these things, the cultivation of faith is central to the prophetic adhkar. When we go to, at night, we recite Ayat al-Kursi, we recite Khawatim al-Baqarah, the closing verse of Surah al-Baqarah, Surah al-Ikhlas, the Mu'awwidhat, Surah al-Falaq and Surah al-Nas. All of these are there amongst other wisdoms to protect our faith. Similarly, when we wake up, the dhikr in the morning, رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبسيدنا محمد نبيا ورسولا. I am content with Allah as my Lord, and with the Prophet, and with Islam as my religion, and with our Master Muhammad as my Prophet and Messenger. All of these are cultivating faith. So many of the other morning, Allahumma ma asbaha bi min ni'matin فَمِنْكَ وَحْدَكَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَكَ. Oh Allah, I arise this morning and I have no blessing except that it is from you alone, without partner. فَلَكَ الْحَمْدِ وَلَكَ الشُّكْرِ. So yours is all praise and yours is all gratitude. Right? Allahumma inni asbahtu ushhiduka wa ushhidu malaikatak wa jami'a khalqik bi annaka anta Allah. Right? Right? Oh Allah, I bear witness to you, and I bear witness to your angels, and I bear witness to all creation that you are one, alone without partner. What's the rest of the dhikr? And I bear witness likewise that Muhammad is your servant and messenger. Many of us learn these adhkar by just saying zzz, 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 zzz. And great, you say it. Allah is merciful. Like if we did work for others the way we do our religious works, we'd get fired. Right? We get fired. Right? God, may Allah protect us from any kind of performance review, because but Allah is merciful, right? But the transformative impact of these adhkar is when they're said with ubudiyya, with slavehood to Allah, but with consciousness of the meaning. But the meaning is a bridge to presence with Allah. Right? Meanings are not sought in of themselves. Right? Meanings are just a bridge to the one who is meant. Right? Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ told us after prayer, or in the morning to say 10 times, لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير. Allah, there's no God but Him, alone without partner. His is the dominion and His is all praise. He gives life and He gives death, and He has power over all things. To repeat that 10 times. This is gharsul iman. Right? And many, many other du'as and dhikrs. Likewise, all of the prayer. Prayer is an expression of faith. And actually, a lot of the early Imams of tafsir said that Allah will not squander your faith. لا يضيع أعمالكم. What's it? وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ. Allah would not squander your faith. They said here, iman refers to what? To prayer. أي صلاتكم. Your prayer. Because all the meanings of faith are encapsulated in prayer. Turning fully to Allah. Raising your hands, ridding yourself of worldliness and all concern besides Allah. When you raise your hands, you say, Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater and more worthy than anything else. And every act of prayer is a statement of faith. I stand before Allah. I recite the book of Allah. hearing the divine address, I bow to the most tremendous and glorify Him. I prostrate to the Most High and glorify Him. Right? All of the prayer is Iman. Right? But we need to be aware of its opposite, Kufr. Right? فَنَقُولُ وَبِاللَّهِ التَّوْفِيقِ. And we say, and by Allah is all success, هُوَ عَدَمُ الْإِيمَانِ عَمَّنْ مِنْ شَأْنِهِ أَنْ يَكُونَ مُؤْمِنًا. Disbelief is non-faith from one who has the capacity to be characterized by faith. Right? And because you don't say that this is a disbelieving pen. Right? Because a pen does not have the capacity of willfully choosing faith. Right? So they define it in this way. So you wouldn't say that's a believing rabbit versus a disbelieving rabbit. Because rabbits have existential faith. There's in min shay'in illa yusabbihu bihamdih. There's nothing whatsoever except that it glorifies the praises of Allah. That is an existential glorification. Right? Its existence affirms its neediness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact that it's originated, the fact that it is created, the fact that it is perishing, the fact that it is given to change, its unique characteristics, its distinctness from other things. All of these are ayat, are signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the lack of faith, it's non-faith, adamul iman, from one who has the capacity to believe. Right? So what is Iman? To understand Kufr, we need to know what Iman is. وَالْإِيمَانُ هُوَ التصديق بالقلب بجميع ما جاء به سيدنا محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم من عند الله تعالى. وَالْإِقْرَارُ بِهِ. And faith is to confirm as true all that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has come with. Right? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And to affirm this. Al-Iqrar, and to affirm this. Right? And to affirm this. This is with respect to be considered a believer in the worldly sense. عند عدم المانع, if there's nothing to prevent one from that. حقيقة أو حكما, if there's nothing to prevent one from affirming it actually or effectively, such that someone fears for their life if they declare they're Muslim. Right? وتفسير then what does it say, Umar? أو حكما فقط, or just effectively. Yeah. So وتفسير الكفر بالإنكار ليس بجامع لخروج الشك وخلو الذهن عنه. He said, then he raises an issue. Right? So he defines disbelief as non-belief from one who has the capacity to believe. He says, because defining disbelief as the rejection of faith is not comprehensive, because it excludes the one who has embraced doubts, or the one simply who does not even think about faith. Right? So this is just a subtlety. Kufr is non-belief, right? And this points to the fact that there's degrees of kufr, right? There's non-belief, then there's disbelief. Then there is rejection of belief. Then there's fighting belief and the believers, right? There's these degrees. So you can make it 4, 5, or 6, depending how you want to make the gradations, right? So, so he says, فَعَلَى الْأَوَّلِ بَيْنَهُمَا تَقَابُلُ الْعَدَمِ وَالْمَلَكَةِ. So, right? So here, there's different types of opposition between two concepts. So he says, according to the first definition, right, that it is simply non-faith. The relationship between disbelief and belief is that of the non-affirmation of something and possessing something. The malaka, possessing something. So Iman is possessing confirmation. Kufr is is non-Iman. وعلى الثاني تقابل التضاد. Or the second definition, one is confirmation, the other is rejection. It is the relationship between Iman and Kufr is that they're opposites. Right? And here Khadimi gives the different types of opposition. بإذن الله تعالى. And he tells us that kufr is of 3 types. Kufr is of 3 types. And we'll look at this بإذن الله تعالى. Today we had slightly shorter class just given circumstances, but the important thing here is to appreciate, right, that ultimately what is the heart, right? The heart is wi'a'ul iman. The heart has been made a container for faith. All virtue is built upon faith. And the ulama would say that, well, depends, right? But the ulama would say that it's hard to argue for a rational basis for virtue, or particularly for absoluteness of virtue, other than faith. Like, why would there be a moral basis for faith, for virtue, other than the reality of there being a hereafter? Because otherwise, why should you do good? Well, it's the right thing to do. Why is it the right? If you keep questioning why, if you use reason, say, well, because I don't want to hurt people. Why don't you want to hurt them? If you're only here for a limited time and there's no accountability, then why wouldn't you be selfish? Why wouldn't you be stingy? Why wouldn't you not care for others? Right? Because each of the virtues, as we will see, besides disbelief, has contexts in which each of the vices can, in a worldly sense, make sense. Each of the virtues, there's a worldly sense against that virtue. Right? So there's the issue of what is the basis of morality? Now you can say there are rational arguments for them, and the philosophers have tried to make rational arguments and for a good society, etc. And we say yes, there's an argument for that, and we build bridges with others through that. Right? We have shared values, and they're virtues. But those shared values, we call to Allah. Why? Because those shared values that other moral people, other people concerned with virtues, concerned with truth and justice and what is right. We say, we agree with that. But what is the basis for this? Why? We say, Lillahi Rabbil Alameen, for Allah, the Lord of the worlds. So, disbelief can seem morbid, right? It can seem morbid, but we're going to look at it and the three types of disbelief, right? And these serve for us as a reminder of what we shield ourselves from, but also to have insight on our own state. Because as we'll see, each of the components of disbelief are manifest in other harms, right? Ignorance, love of leadership, rejection of truth. Each of these has an ultimate manifestation in disbelief, has a relative manifestation in other blameworthy traits of the heart and other sinful state actions of the limbs. So we'll stop there. بإذن الله تعالى وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Just a reminder بإذن الله تعالى that Seekers Guidance has launched its campaign to support scholars and students of knowledge around the world to fight the faith pandemic that can affect the ummah because of the scholars and students of knowledge being in such critical state, right? There's ulama who are unable to function because there's multiple families living in a small apartment, right? They're even, now they're stuck at home. They can't pay their rent, but they can't even find a place to teach because there's 10 children to two-bedroom apartment. So even, from home, they're not able to teach. Their institutions are on the threat of being taken over because they're not able to pay the rent for them, but they can't even feed themselves, right? And this is a critical situation around the world. Many of the students of knowledge who are overseas are stranded. They can't buy food. They're worried that they don't have health insurance overseas. There's all kinds of crises. So we're trying to raise $1 million this Ramadan. This is eligible for both zakat and charity. So please give generously to this and encourage friends and family to give. Charity lifts tribulations, brings tremendous reward. Charity, the Prophet ﷺ says, proof. So if Allah has given you, give generously. If Allah has granted you but little, give from what your Lord has given you and give your zakat. Give your zakat. The best zakat is that which has the greatest benefit. There's no benefit like assisting in the preservation of divine guidance and prophetic teachings. So give to support deserving scholars and students around the world. So if you go to SeekersGuidance.org/donate, give to the Islamic Scholars Fund and encourage others to do so. We also have an excellent zakat calculator that can help you calculate your zakat and share this encouragement with others as well, because one who encourages others to do the good has the reward of all those who act upon it. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.